Okay, here we are for another conversation.
Yeah. I'm just going to jump in. I think what we just did before you pressed record, we should do for a short time, I think, publicly.
Okay,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, just because I think that's really important to have that stillness and a ground together. And
okay.
I'll say to you and to the listener, I yawn a lot. It's not because I'm tired. It's because after my whole lifetime, I've started to honor my body. So it's just my nervous system being honored and helping me stay present. So I'm not being rude to you, Jenk, or anyone.
Great. Yawning is allowed. Okay, so let's take a moment to notice, to get connected with ourselves, really. It's so easy for big topics to become an intellectual game, wanting to share everything, wanting to look at all the different things. And today we have some big topics. My wish for the listener here is that maybe more clarity is possible around these topics, maybe more sense of faith in life, that things can change and things are changing. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So would you like to share those few lines to get us started?
Sure. Can I do my land acknowledgement and then?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
Because we're going to talk about capitalism, and I'm wearing my orange shirt. For those who don't know, it's a very, I guess, Canadian thing. I'm just going to show you here. It says, "Every child matters." So showing respect for the Indigenous people of the world, but of Canada and where I live. We're on the unceded, which means stolen territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. And I'm just doing what I can to make amends for the privilege I've benefited from. And when we talk about capitalism, it's had a very hard impact on us all, and particularly on the Indigenous people who definitely did not live in that system. And I just wanted to acknowledge that before we continue.
Yeah. And I want to very, very briefly just define capitalism in my own words. Because now that you use the word capitalism, the way I see it, very brief definition is profit and profit only. With that, how does that feel to you?
You know, when you said that, like I have a bit of wet eyes at the moment from the land acknowledgement and your intention. Um, and I'm really noticing my feet on the ground and my bum in my chair. And when you say that, it's really painful. Like it
Yeah,
feels hurtful in my solar plexus. It just feels awful, which I guess is what it should. That is feels terrible.
yeah,
A lot of
yeah,
flight energy in the context of fight, flight, and freeze. My nervous system definitely feels that.
yeah. I mean, we've turned ourselves into money-making machines, no longer even connected with the deeper layers of life. And it's destroying us. It's polluting the lakes and the oceans. It's destroying the land, the soil. It's really like poison.
Mhm.
Yeah. Of course, we're going to talk a lot more about this. And yeah. So the need for change seems to be pretty obvious in our world these days. Even especially after COVID, the economy has lost its mind completely, right? The gap between the ultra rich and the rest of us really has become incredibly large. It's continuing to widen, deepen. And it's on our faces. It's on our faces on the news, on YouTube, on social media, everywhere. Cities become unaffordable. Young people, millennials, I mean, are the best educated group of people ever to live. The capitalism utopia has failed. And I think we are at the end of capitalism. And our grief needs to be acknowledged because something has failed here.
Yes.
And I think our healthy anger needs to be acknowledged, that we've been promised a lot of things. The promises have not paid off. Contribution to society, find a job, get specialized in your work, get the education, and then you'll have your house. Well, a lot of young people can only dream about owning a house today in this world economy. A lot of people are barely able to afford rent, groceries, life expenses. Capitalism has turned us into slaves, wage slaves. And clearly something has to change. And we'll be exploring what capitalism is also internally as a way of being, as a paradigm that we live in. How does that feel like inside? Because it's not only a system out there, it's a paradigm within which we live from the inside out as well. So let's see what comes to us both with all that. And I know that you want to share those 3 lines here.
Okay, let me just get that. I'm going to read these. Without love, change is not possible. Without healthy empowerment, change is not possible. Without people getting together and supporting each other, change is not possible. This next one's difficult for me. Without joy, change is not possible. Without gratitude, joy is not possible. And I'd love to talk about gratitude at some point as we continue.
Yeah. So these are a few lines that I wrote to share in this topic and this talk with you. And these lines just came to me in a moment of inspiration, and they all made sense, and they seemed extremely necessary for this topic. Because if we are only angry about capitalism, we have nothing other than anger. That anger becomes aggression. That anger becomes wanting to control others, becomes a very unhealthy type of toxic energy that can destroy us. It will destroy whatever we're trying to do also, but it will also destroy us.
Yeah.
So
it can be, it ends up being very adversarial. It can lead easily to us, them, you, me.
Yeah, and in the name of freedom and peace, when we make another group into the enemy, and then suddenly we are fighting in the name of peace, those words even in the same sentence, it doesn't make sense. So I wonder if, myself included, if we can step into a different paradigm where it's all of us together. Because capitalism is already us versus them. Capitalism already makes an object out of the working class To me, capitalism is the same thing as objectification. I make myself into an object. I don't take care of my healthy needs. I don't listen to myself. I treat my body as an object. I put it to work. And the employer makes an object out of me. I'm employee number whatever. Only for the different digits on the screen that we call my bank account. And those digits on the screen are created today out of thin air. There is no accountability anymore for the financiers. They create money out of nothing. They lend it to people through corporate, government, military, the whole thing together. They lend it to people as student loans. The lie is get educated so you can specialize in the workforce as contribution to society. Money created out of nothing. And they make interest out of it at the expense of us. So the situation tends to be a lot worse than a lot of us think about, especially for those of us who don't do research about these things because we have other things we need to be busy with. Our lives are busy because we are continuously having to work. To think that the bank is doing me a favor by giving me mortgage that I'll have to pay for 20 plus years is delusional. Mm-hmm. Nobody is doing no one a favor. We are being taken as fools and slaves. We are all busy not seeing what's happening, contributing to the wealth of the 1% of the 1% who are among some of the most traumatized people who don't feel the impact of what they're causing in the collective for the rest of the population. So there's profound slavery happening today. It's just shifted. We're no longer getting whipped in the cotton fields or whatever. We are being whipped when the time comes to pay the tax that we don't get much in return for from our governments in terms of services, and corruption in the government, and corporations owning politicians. Everybody is in the bed together having this giant orgy at our expense. We are the ones slaving away in some ways for their gains. But the moment we make them into an enemy, instead of becoming aware of a situation, seeing something clearly, the moment we make them into an enemy, we create more division. But division itself is the problem. And this system benefits from divisions in our society. For as long as we're divided into political parties and groups and identities and this, for as long as we're fighting amongst ourselves, we cannot pay attention to this thing that really matters. This thing, economic freedoms. If you don't have economic freedom, even democracy doesn't work. For me to vote freely, I have to feel free first. If I'm not feeling free economically, I cannot vote freely, really understanding what's at stake. So economic freedom to me is one of the most important social issues today. Extremely important. We think we have progress because we have iPhones and Netflix and TVs, and that a few people in the world are thinking they could go to Mars. We think we have progress. We don't have progress. Not much has changed from the kings and the queens and the lords and the ladies ruling everybody else. Today, that's the CEO. Today, that's the corporate elites. I don't even like calling them elites because there's nothing noble about anything that they do. They are the bullies. They are the abusers of an entire planet. We're talking about 8 billion people, globalized economy, this virus of financialization of the world has its tentacles everywhere. Everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. It's turning everything into a commodity. Everything has a price now. Everything is something to sell or to buy. Everything, from drinking water to the apple, to the raw materials to build a house. Every single thing has a price tag. Everything has been made into an object through this paradigm that each of us live in, through this heavily left brain paradigm. Left brain in the sense that it objectifies. And as it objectifies, everything is devalued. The sacredness of life is thrown out of the window, including the sacredness of ourselves, our humanity, and also the sacredness of the other person. That's how we can justify suddenly the army comes from one part of the world, destroys another part of the world. Well, they're not human beings. They are the enemy that has to be destroyed. Objects that I can manipulate depending on how I feel. And usually how we feel is survival panic, survival anxiety, because we're not in touch deeply with the deeper layers of life. So I see this as an economic crisis, systemic crisis, as well as a crisis of debt. So it's not just capitalism. It's one thing. We can call it capitalism, consumerism, but we can also call it a crisis of debt. So the question is something like, can we begin to live more deeply? Can we recognize what's at stake? And globally, can we create systems where democracy can become a reality, maybe first time in the world? Can that really happen today?
I'm wondering, Cenk, because that part really is so fantastic. What you just said, the questions. I'm wondering if you could say them again, but then we pause, like maybe the first few questions, and let that land, like that deepen in us, because it's just so important. It's so valuable to like when you make those statements, which is so great, to then like let them seep into the depth that you're saying.
Yeah, if I can remember. And we connect with the deeper layers of life, with what really matters, like with the things that matter the most.
Can we pause there? That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Just to have that feeling, giving the permission to feel what that means, like what's been lost.
Yeah, right. The sacredness of life. Yeah. And yeah, when is enough, right? I mean, is it enough to have 1 million in the bank? Is it enough to have 2 houses, 4, 5, 6, 25? A yacht, another yacht, mega yacht? Like when is it enough? I mean, how can a mega corporation with incredible profit, that means having slaves all around the world working for you, can justify not paying taxes? How can that happen? For that to happen, thousands of people need to benefit from that corruption. Because to have such a mass level corruption, you have to have an army of lawyers and politicians and people working for you. You have to be feeding them the money that you're not contributing back to society. You're not contributing back to your social services, whatever, with the tax that can be put to that. You need to have an army of legal, so-called legal official representatives of the people at your payroll to be able to enact such high level of corruption. You know, I see that kind of thing if we think about the corruption in the world and everything. So when we follow the money, the reality we see is so dark. Because if I'm the CEO, shareholders, whatever, if I'm that profit person, I will do everything to pay less to my workers because that adds to my profit. What I don't pay to them, I get in profit. And I will cut corners in every way possible with my consumer. Mm-hmm. I will also give them the cheap, bad product to the highest amount that I can extract from them. So on one hand, the product loses quality. The workers are not getting paid well. It's only about the end number. Mm-hmm. Isn't that insanity? I mean, if that's not insanity, what is it? Mm-hmm. To make the shareholders happy, I'm going to inflict the greatest damage to the environment because I'm going to cut corners there too. I'm not going to purify the water before I dump it to the ocean. I'm just going to dump into the ocean, period. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to invest in anything that could be healthy. And I will cut corners at every step of the way. And I will benefit from unemployment in my society because that unemployment means every employed person needs to shut up and continue working because the threat is there. You can get fired and end up on the street just like the rest of them. Mm-hmm. Nobody has incentive to end unemployment in a capitalistic worldview. Unemployment helps them. It's a threat that the employed worker needs to shut up and continue working. So the system creates its own problems that it's happy living with.
Yes.
And we are wondering in a capitalist society why there is still hunger, why there is still unemployment, because it's not to the benefit of the capitalists to change it. That's the only reason why. Not because they are lazy. And the biggest lie, oh, they're lazy. Has nothing to do with these people's laziness. It has everything to do with the successful predators at the top. They need groups of vulnerable individuals to keep preying on the entire middle class. The middle class is shrinking because it's becoming lower class very quickly.
I'm wondering if I can query you about a collective aspect of the corruption.
Yeah.
Because I feel I agree with your points, and then I think about what your notes that I read, People Together, and I feel like the corruption, if I'll just a simple definition, may be taking more than is warranted, taking more than is being freely offered. We could say freely offered by nature or by employees, people. And an extreme example is one you cited from the CEOs. And there's also like a collective corruption that goes on where I'm thinking of Ronnie Chang, if I'm saying his name correctly, comedy skit about Amazon and the shipping and how we can just get anything, like 1 pen. He makes it a really telling joke. But there is an idea, I feel, or not an idea, there's a societal agreement that corruption is okay. Now, yes, at the CEO level, that's so massive, but there can be lots of corruption, like in my day-to-day life, how I live, how I think, how I view the world. And when we think about, like in your statement, people getting together, how can we get together? Well, what would happen if we get together energetically in a non or lessening corrupt way? And how would that impact? Because that collective action,
Yeah.
even if it's thought is action, how we carry ourselves, but even if we change our behavior, our mindset, it has an invisible, you can't see it coming off of a person, but the impact is nevertheless there. So somehow to,
Yeah. Can I just invite you to take a look at the quotes by Solzhenitsyn
okay,
and find there the one about the individual, an individual and the lie, the individual that doesn't partake in the lie. I think that's so.
I think they're just at the bottom. Oh yeah, the simple step of a courageous individual is not to take part in the lie. One word of truth outweighs the world. And I know that can sound oh so romantic and oh airy fairy stuff, but it's totally real.
So yes, I mean, my answer to what you're asking, I think, is that when we are connected with our own truth, that's extremely powerful.
Mm.
I mean, just for a moment, let's not even think about how that truth will manifest as action in the world.
Mhm.
Just getting in touch with our truth is so powerful.
Yeah, you can see it in your expression in the moment.
It's so extremely powerful because that's our heart.
Mm.
Every time I feel connected with my truth, I can change the word truth with heart. It will be the same.
Yeah.
So we get connected with what we love, what is lovable, what is naturally lovable, because everything else is trauma, is caused because of trauma. Even the capitalism over objectifying worldview is a trauma response to the difficulties of life. But the place in us that open-hearted, that's free from trauma. That's a place that's untouched by trauma. So that's the place that says, no matter what happened, I'm still here. I'm still here. The beating heart of the broken-hearted individual is still there. And that's the place where life flows.
Mhm.
Untraumatized life.
Mhm. The joy.
Life, yeah. Joy, life, empowerment. That's so much stronger than any trauma.
Mhm.
And when we feel that, we know. But I think for us to feel that, for us to even have the trust in the process that even exists within me, I think we need support from other people who are talking about these things, who are seeing the things that I'm seeing. You know, the most powerful thing is that what I'm aware of, you are aware of. And in this conversation, I understand that you are aware of what I'm aware of. That means in what I see, I'm not alone.
Mhm.
That's the most important thing to feel. That in what I'm seeing, I'm not alone. That means I am not crazy.
Mhm.
That means some things are really extremely out of tune in the world. And because I see that doesn't make me wrong, doesn't mean that there is something wrong with me that I should fix and become like everybody else.
Mhm.
Like somehow I am not being able to adjust to society. No, the society is unadjustable. The society is toxic. The conditioning of survival panic based living is toxic. It's destructive. It's corrosive. No one should be trying to adjust to that.
No, you need a refuge.
You need a refuge where you can hear yourself.
Yeah. I'd like to just share with you one experience that happened yesterday of the joy. I feel a little bit embarrassed saying this, but how joy can manifest with sort of spontaneous collective action. So yesterday morning, I cycled really early in the morning to Stanley Park, and there was this massive piece of foam in the ocean, hard foam, that was maybe, I don't know, 10 feet long, 2 or 3 feet deep, 3 feet, 4 feet wide, massive. I couldn't get out of the ocean. I tried to like push it to shore. I came back later when the tide had gone out with a hand saw to saw it in sections and lift it out. And I'm right on the seawall, and people don't know Vancouver. It's a very populated area. It's sunny, it's a beautiful day. Many, many people are walking by. And it so happened that a bunch of people ended up helping me. And we sawed it, we lifted it, we kicked it, we broke into pieces. And there was just a spontaneous collective action. We even talked about that this piece of foam is here, that's on us. This is our responsibility. And so people were filming and all of that. But 5, 6, 7 people, we just collectively, because we knew it was the right thing to do. And there was I don't know any of these people, I'll never see them again, but it was just that moment where people come together and everyone was happy, no one was griping. And I think things like that can really bring in the joy, and that, the society's toxicity that you're describing can have a bit of a pause, that we have some power here to lift a piece of foam out of the ocean.
Yeah.
But to be together, we're in this together, and we can do stuff together. And it was just an absolutely beautiful moment. And
it restores your faith in humanity, doesn't it?
It was beautiful. We
Yeah.
exchanged names with one of them. The other guy who left, 3 main people did it. He said, "So nice to meet you." And we went on our way, but it was just like, yes. So you kind of build that individual field of, wow, we can do stuff. And then like a collective field, people watching it felt, oh, wow. And I think, although it seems like a simple example, those things have effects.
Yeah.
And what was the other, you said I was going to go back just 1 second, sorry, to the top note.
No problem.
Gratitude.
Gratitude, yeah.
Gratitude. Like for me, when I feel like right now, I can feel it in here, that joy of that moment and talking with you, the connection I have with you. And that is like a door opening that then makes, because you're talking about trauma, that makes me feel that my trauma can not be in charge. I call it the unconscious driver, and the joy can be in charge. And then that joy lets me I'll just stick with the example, bring the saw down, because I feel gratitude for my life and the world and Stanley Park and the Indigenous people that were such great stewards for so long. And I can feel that gratitude, and other people feel it. And the thing I love about gratitude, of course, it makes me feel good. But this one little caveat that I wanted to share, because every time I see the word gratitude, I think of the quote from Barbara Wall-Kimmerer in her absolutely life-changing book, Braiding Sweetgrass. And she says, gratitude is not enough.
Yes. Yeah,
So
that's
sorry, I'm just going to finish. So I could feel so
yeah.
grateful for Stanley Park.
Uh-huh.
And that's not enough. It's great, but I have to do something too.
Yeah, because gratitude can also become passive. Just like people say, oh, you should be grateful. You should be grateful. In other words, they say, oh, you should shut up. You should not talk about today's problems. You should be grateful that there is no war in your neighborhood.
Yes.
To say that to someone is to shut them down.
Mm-hmm.
It's another type of insanity, because
you're not okay the way you are. Like it's very hard to feel joy if someone tells you the way you are is not acceptable to me. So lock that away further, please. Add some more layers to your armor.
I mean, a slave is still a slave, whether or not they're grateful, they're not dead yet. It doesn't change that they're still a slave. We can be grateful and still try to end our own slavery at the same time. So we can be grateful for the incredible, I mean, today with our advanced technology, we live in standards of living that would have been unimaginable 500 years ago, 400 years ago, 200 years ago, even 100 years ago. Unimaginable. That's to be grateful for. Thousands and millions, if not billions, of hardworking people made this happen. Today, the way we live is incredible. And it's not due to capitalism. It's despite of capitalism. If anything, capitalism, I don't think, has in any way been helpful to create the world we have today. It's been a huge barrier that not much more is here. It's been an incredible barrier that only favors extreme competition, objectification of ourselves and others. It's such a lopsided living, so disconnected. Just imagine the same drive, the same drive in a healthy way. If that can be plugged in to our entire being instead of just the survival panic trauma response, togetherness, collective wisdom, collective progress. In that sense, we have not even started. We have only just begun. This is the very beginning of true civilization. We are at the very beginning of true civilization.
Yeah, because we're developing, right? We're not finished. There's no, I think one aspect is thinking that we'll get to some point and then it's like a static state, or that we're going to be here forever. Because I think part of the, like we were talking about trauma, it'd be really interesting to talk about like, how do you deal with the trauma that keeps our system rolling? But trauma doesn't like to move. It likes to stay locked down. So, but we are developing, we are moving. But then if you're driven by the shadow realm or your traumas, then you're going to be in the freeze mode. And
exactly. Yeah.
You can get.
And you're going to really believe that human beings are only capable of literally destroying each other to get ahead. You're going to believe that that's really the only way to be on this earth. And you will also think that human beings have always done only that. But that's not true. We have overwhelming evidence of cooperation in human evolution, overwhelming evidence. And we also know, I mean, in places where there is still structure, still different positions, different responsibilities, there is still organization, but democratic, and nobody is being coerced into doing anything. These systems tend to be so much more productive and healthy and joyful in every way possible compared to what we have today that we call capitalism. To think that capitalism had any contribution whatsoever to humanity, I think, is to be deluded. I think capitalism has been holding us back in so many ways. I mean, because of profit, one discovery is not being shared by another company somewhere else. It has to be sold. But some countries, they don't have the money to give. And then so you say, oh, well, we'll sell it to you. We keep the patent for this. We will sell the product to you for this amount of money, regardless of what it is. And if it's about pharmaceuticals, if it's about medication, those people in another country are literally going to die simply because they cannot afford what you have that is going to save them. What kind of world is this? It's complete insanity.
It's not a gratitude world.
Instead of collective wisdom, collective sharing of resources, intellectual property, collective sharing of discoveries. I mean, share everything, lift up the entire world, and just see where humanity goes. I think we haven't even started. That's what I think. The world that we have today, people are being squeezed continuously by profit earning mentality. They're being squeezed into living in joyless economies, meaningless jobs, joyless economies. With our technology today, we no longer even need to do that. If only we can change the way we see ourselves and the world and each other.
Mm.
I mean, the sky's the limit here.
So where would you say are some starting points? Because that's
So if we say that economy needs to be stabilized first, so people can be lifted out of poverty, hunger, all that, all these incredibly deeply bleeding wounds of humanity, if those can be remedied first through economic freedoms, and for that to happen, unions have to come back. For that to happen, we cannot have 100 times difference between the average salary of the worker and what the CEO and the shareholders are making. We cannot have that kind of disparity because the work is being done by the workers. So how come the person at the top not doing that work can earn 100 times more than the
or
average
more
salary of a regular worker? That's complete insanity. I think that has to end. So unions, very powerful unions, coming together, showing people that unions were the case 30, 40 years ago. Unions were a lot stronger. Apparently, this is what I've been learning recently with my research. Even in the US, unions were very strong. But capitalism came with all their agendas, all their big money, bought politicians, corrupted everything, and changed that. So it's time for it to come back. But what I'm trying to say is that it's not a new idea. It's been done before, it can be done again. And it can be done even better in a larger scale, could become the new standard. So it's clear to me that things have to change in a big way and new standards to be established.
So before we came on, you were saying, we were talked about, this sort of dichotomy of only seeing things outside or only seeing things inside. And so to bring about this quality of change, or to bring things that were more powerful in the past, say workers' rights, unions, so on, equality of pay. Some countries, I'm not sure if they still have them, they had a limit of how much more the boss could make compared to the lowest person.
If it was up to me, I would take, if it was up to me, let me tell you a few ideas.
Okay.
If it was up to me, I would make every salary in the world for every job, I would make it the same. Just think about that for just 1 second.
Okay,
just to entertain ourselves. Let's just think about that. No matter what you do, you get paid the same amount of money. What this means is that if I want to be a lawyer for the sake of wanting to be a lawyer, well, I will still go ahead and do that because that's what I want.
Because that's your joy.
That's my joy. That's my truth. That's the way that I get to express myself. That's me. So that means you take away from the system the incentive of money for money's sake. You just take that out from the equation and see what happens. What happens is there is no space left for corruption anymore. There is no space left for someone going into a career only for the money and then destroying everybody as a result. They just wanted money. And we call that freedom. We call that democracy. That's absurd.
So I have an image of a huge dam, like a hydroelectric dam at the moment. And in the dam, there's a lot of it's like an emotional dam of like like unfelt anger, uh, unmet needs, fear, gripping on, I got to keep what I have.
Yeah.
And so to get to where you're saying, like, you have to open some of the gates slowly to that dam, or have, the individual and collective fields, if you will, or desire, willingness, skills. These are all skills. These are skills that I've learned, like to deal with anger is a skill. How do you start to deal with that dam? Because it's a huge dam,
I
and
know
it's
because we have
blocking.
our own survival fears.
Yeah.
And usually they've been passed down to us from previous generations. I mean, just think about the world wars. The world wars are pretty Eurocentric. We can also think about wars and incredible atrocities all around the world. Just we can take the last 300, 400 years and look at so many incredibly bloody affairs in the name of territory, in the name of nationalism, in the name of religion or ethnicity, whatever. And we also see that so much of that was also in the name of resources, in the name of what we call money, right? This tool of exchange that was invented at one point. Now it's losing value because artificially it's being printed with nothing backing it. The financial sector destroyed what we call the economy. The financial sector took things into an imaginary level, imaginary money being created out of nothing. And so capitalism is imploding from the inside out. But what you asked was, we also have our fears. One of the things is also unworthiness. When a human being feels worthy, they speak up. When a human being feels their worth and value as a human being, just as a human being, as part of creation, they begin to speak up and not take bullshit anymore.
Can we pause for a second? Because I think, again, it's like in the beginning, I think like what you're saying is so essential, but again, it can be said without being felt. Because I imagine, I don't feel 100% worthy. And whoever's listening to this, I don't know who you are. I suspect you don't feel 100% worthy. So to hear, you said, people who feel worthy will speak up. So then I can feel that kind of stuck in my throat and in my heart.
Yeah.
So if I may, I'm not sure if I'm taking over here.
It's okay.
I'm going to say it, and then just let's have a bit of silence. So, as an invitation to the listeners and ourselves, just to notice what's happening, and not to say that there's anything wrong with what's happening. So someone who feels worthy will speak up.
For me, what this is bringing up is actually a lot of sadness. Because those who don't feel they have inherent worth, those who don't feel they are worthy of being treated like real human beings, so many of them have their own woundings. They never felt accepted. They never felt they could belong. No one said, "I'm proud of you, son." So many of these young men have gone into military, have become soldiers, have killed and died in battlefields for centuries to feel that their lives mattered. And in so many occasions, it's just the corporations that got rich with their sacrifice. In so many occasions, there was no real threat to national security. There wasn't. But there was a threat to the ruling class quality of life. They didn't want to give up what they had. So they had to conjure up, create wars to make money out of. Simple. None of this is conspiracy today. This is all documented. There are a number of documentaries with the biggest channels showing them. This is all out in the open now. There's no conspiracy here at all. It's not needed. It's so fucked that we don't need conspiracies anymore. We don't have to think, are we being manipulated? It's all happening right here. Right under our nose, we're being used and abused and oppressed. And it's time to speak up. It's time to say something. It's time to create true democracy, real democracy. Right? It's time to teach our kids not what to think, but how to think. Mm-hmm. How to think. How to feel. Not to brainwash them so they can be good soldiers when the time comes to use them for our own profit. Mm. So that the 1% of the 1% can buy another 10 houses for themselves. So they can vacation in different places in the world. So they can buy more drugs because they're all addicts. People are dying for these people to continue their addictions to more.
Yeah, more. I just want to share what's happening for me when you're talking about the soldiers. And I think, as you know, I enjoy the work of Thomas Hübl. And in his book, he's talking about collective trauma. And at a workshop he describes an American Vietnam veteran goes. And within him, he had a tremendous amount of shame about what had happened to him, trauma, anger. And most of the people at the conference were not American. And they were like, you guys, and there were some euphemisms being used, and people straightened him out and were like, you went into a small country as the huge country and destroyed them, brutalized them. And he was kind of left alone. And then subsequently during that conference, some American women came to him and said, we paid the taxes for your weaponry, your planes, your clothes, your food, everything that you needed, we paid for.
Yeah.
And when I read that, it was a really intense experience. I'm not American, I'm Canadian. And for me, what happened was I paid for residential schools out of my taxes. I can say I didn't know, I was never taught. And I know I've talked with many other white people about these issues, and there's a lot of conscious, or I suspect unconscious unwillingness to talk about it and what it means. And it's like, and then though all of that hurt is present, and then will drive our behavior out of lack, and capitalism will happily feed off of that. Rather than, I paid for residential schools.
Yeah, we are financing the oppression of our own governments.
Yeah,
either inside or outside, either inside the country or waging wars with others. Yeah.
Or, for example, as a white man, I'm very aware of what's happening in the Ukraine. I have a friend who had to flee Ethiopia, where there's basically a war on that gets no coverage in that involves Black people. And to some degree, I'm not super well versed on this, foreign corporations wanting to go into that land and exploit it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how do we get into a space? Because then that comes back to corruption, right? This is again all about corruption and lack
Yeah. And
and not feeling worthy.
and
And
they,
I want my cheap stuff.
I mean, they fucked up the economic system through finance, through Wall Street, imaginary bonds and this and that. They fucked it up so badly that no one can save capitalism. No one. Because capitalism creates its own end. So the only efforts to save it has been print more money. Well, when you print more money to stimulate the economy or whatever, when we print more money, the value of existing currency goes down. The value of each dollar goes down. What that creates inflation. So what was $30 is now $40. This insanity machine is by default unsustainable. And as a result, what happens is everything is becoming unaffordable. And when you can no longer buy the food you need to survive, that's the end of capitalism. It cannot continue. That's it. And it's happening now in a much faster fashion. It's happening more and more and more and more. One crisis after another. The decades, it used to be 30 years or whatever between the two. Now it's shortened. Now every 2-3 years, every 5 years maximum, there is the boom and bust cycle. This is extremely unsustainable. It's getting worse because it's quickened. And it's going to show, it is showing already, I think, many more people that there is something deeply wrong that we all need to look at in the way that we live together. There is something very deeply wrong in the way we organize our systems and communities and societies. Let's look at that. It's so important.
So what would you say then to get away from, this massive system of the banks and fractional reserve systems?
Is to feel. I think the most important thing is to feel. Is to feel. Because if you think, let's get rid of this system and bring another one without feeling, the same thing is going to happen.
Yeah, because the drive will still be there.
Yes. What's lacking here in this extremely inhumane system is our feeling capacity is lacking. Mm-hmm. That's what's not there. Everything else is there. There are a lot of brilliant ideas in the world. There are many, many geniuses, economic geniuses, political geniuses. They've been around for a very long time. What's lacking the most is to actually feel deeply, connect with that, what really matters. Joy, gratitude, love, being our unique self, living our truth, community, getting together, healing. Healing matters. Learning about trauma matters. Looking at the wounded child in us, unmet needs, that really matters. Because if I'm not taking care of my unmet needs, I will look for it somewhere else. Mm-hmm. I will look for it when someone asks me, can you come work for me? I'll give you $200,000 a year. That's where I'm going to look for it. I'm going to look for it when the military comes and say, we want you. I'm going to look for that unmet needs resolution in there. Mm. And without asking myself, do I really want that?
Yeah. If I can go back to that story, because I forgot exactly why I was telling a story, but you've reminded me that Vietnam vet had grown up in a home of intense violence and was never taught what you're describing, how to feel, how to honor that child. Like, so when I had us pause to that moment about someone who feels worthy will stand up. right away I felt that injured child who's not in charge, but that's what, yes, we are worthy. And so this veteran had to find an outlet for that violence in him, and he didn't have the skills, so he ended up joining a violent, oppressive organization and doing violent, horrific things until he realized he didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
And then started working on trauma and being grateful actually to his ancestors for like their resilience to get with all our foibles and problems here. And then he became became a focal point of his life rather than just throwing the anger out.
Yeah. And I think we are in so much debt to ourselves. We have an emotional debt, a debt to our own bodies with resting, because we're not resting. We don't know how to stop. We are launching ahead, like we're going ahead, this motion of moving forward. We don't even know why. We don't even know what motivates us. But the insanity, the trauma response, the survival panic says, you have to keep doing. You can't stop. If you stop, you'll die.
Mm-hmm.
If you stop, you'll die. You have to keep working. You have to keep doing. The Protestant work ethic, right? If you gain access to heaven through work. So even religion has been used into creating the world we have today.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Yeah.
it's also filled like the boardrooms with traumatized people who are enacting trauma responses. So in that way, like they're not out there or other, in a different position with a lot more power, but their responses are very similar.
Yeah.
But they just have like my response is going to have a very small global impact. But if I'm running a massive corporation, the same response in a very different context will have a very different outcome. So in that there's that similarity, that communion of humanity, of the need to pause.
Yeah.
And feel.
Yeah.
And be a brave person, because we're saying someone who feels of worth will speak up. Think of the person, in some massive CEO, and they know what they're doing is wrong.
And they might be depressed, right? They might be abusing substances because of their depression.
So to have the courage to say,
where the self-betrayal happens, there is suffering.
Mm-hmm.
If they know that what they're doing is hurting people, and if they continue, that's self-betrayal. Mm-hmm. That alone can traumatize someone if they don't know how to get out of it.
And moment by moment, right?
Yeah. And so we can no longer function, even in the name of activism, peace, or freedom, democracy, whatever. We cannot function from an us versus them point of view. We need to even see and at least resonate with, at least feel a little bit of compassion for even the oppressors at the so-called top of the chain, and see that it's not like these people are incredibly happy or peaceful or they feel incredibly free. It isn't. Mm-hmm. They're not. And we don't want to create enemies out of them. We don't want to do that, because that's how survival panic works. And that's how fascism gets created. Mm-hmm. Even in the name of peace, we can no longer say, I'm fighting for peace. That's absurd. You cannot be fighting for peace. Either you're fighting or you're at peace. You've got to choose one. And I think today in the world, we are really at a threshold where we have to see this distinction very clearly. Mm-hmm. Either you are for peace and love, or you're part of the fucking problem. Yeah. And we got to do our inner work to transform our aggression, bitterness, resentment into healthy empowerment. So that
There's the joy
because
again.
because there is no guarantee, no matter what we do, that something is going to change in the world. So how can I express my truth without trying to find guarantees?
Yes.
Because we might do everything and still not much might change, but you got to still do it because that's who you are.
Right. And I think this is such a brilliant point, because I know I struggle with that certainty, the need for certainty.
Sure, me too.
And that's a trauma response as well. And I don't know what's going to happen down the road with whatever action I did or don't do, or things I said or didn't say. But the feel in the moment, if I am acting like you're saying with a good volition, being honest with myself, then in that moment that feels good, and it'll reinforce that field that I was kind of alluding to earlier, that around corruption. Because if we can, each of us, do these things, it does create a resonance that has, I feel so new agey saying that, but that just seems that's been borne out in my life. It does have a very real impact.
The joy, right? The joy and the happiness.
Yeah, the joy and the happiness, and knowing I can speak up, and that I don't need. I mean, I think I'm not sure how to discuss this, but that profound need for certainty and like quick, definitive result, A to B now, is really harmful.
Yes, and that's the same survival panic who's looking for that.
Yeah, not to learn, like how you said, to learn how to feel. It's like, how do you sit with a feeling of uncertainty and be okay with it?
Exactly. And I think within that uncertainty, learning to get comfortable with that discomfort, stepping into the unknown and unknowableness of tomorrow. Tomorrow is always unknown, just like 5 minutes from now. Absolutely nothing is guaranteed. Absolutely nothing. Things can change in very positive, pleasant, very unpleasant, negative. Wow, what a big opening. I think we need to open to that. I think the survival panic is looking for the known and is trying to continuously hold on to what it knows, even
if it's dysfunctional.
Even if this is dysfunctional.
There's safety in known, regardless of what that known might be.
Yes, the prison that I know is better than the uncertainty of not knowing. The suffering that I know, at least I know what to expect. Wow, it's a low bar for our lives, right? To live from there.
But it's safe.
It's safe, but not really. Not really safe. Yeah, it has an illusion of safety. Somehow, at least, in fact, it's not even an illusion of safety. It's more like an illusion of control. Within that tiny little thing, egocentric worldview, the separate self, there's an illusion of control. Just like when we try to control our thinking and our emotions, at least I don't get to feel all the other things that are beyond my control. At least within my own headquarters, I can keep up the illusion of control by trying to manipulate my internal world. It never works.
I'm wondering if we could do another pause, because I think this is a great one to feel again, is if you can say something about the prison of our small safety versus the expansive possibility, unknown, and then we can pause, because you said it so brilliantly. I don't remember exactly what you said, but it sounded very good.
Yeah, just a tiny little perspective that we carry within ourselves, tiny little place where somehow I'm at the center of that tiny universe with the illusion that I have control. And I just don't want anyone to bust that bubble, to pop that bubble of illusion. Because I'm so scared to notice my personal will has a limit. Yeah, I think we're afraid of recognizing our own fear. We are literally afraid of just noticing that we're scared.
Yeah.
We're all
I have
scared.
very flat affect, like kind of pending joy was there, and then kind of this flat freeze fear that was kind of not really clear as to what it was, just kind of
I think being human is difficult, no matter who we are, no matter what time we live in, no matter our conditions. Being human is already difficult. I mean, we are growing up extremely vulnerable as a child, as a baby, the confusing times of hormones kicking in teenager years. Our voice changes everything, the hair comes. I mean, and then sexuality comes, like just being human.
Mhm.
It's so, so difficult, so many layers. Before we know who we are, the decline begins. Oh my God, I cannot exercise as much as I used to. Or I used to think I could do anything and I was invincible. Now I'm starting to see my grandparent died. Oh, my parents are getting older. Death exists. Old age is here. We are not invincible. The teenager years, how we can feel invincible like that, right? Me against the world, or let me, hear me or whatever. But it's so vulnerable, and it's so difficult to be human. And I wonder if, as a society, more and more people, if we can connect with each other around that place. Oh, this is difficult.
Mhm.
Most of the time, I don't know really what I'm doing. Sometimes I don't even know who I am, not in a spiritual transcendent sense, but in a disconnection sense, dissociation, trauma, inner critic, shame, guilt, fear.
Yeah, that's a great one. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah. Can we admit that? Stay in that humility, burn through the humiliation that can come with that, the shame,
Mhm.
and connect with each other at that human place. I think
Can
that's
I
the
say that?
remedy.
Yeah. And I think to like twofold, like, can I say, I don't know? And then can whoever's listening honor that rather than, you know, have some adverse response against, I don't know.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel great. My belly's
Yeah. And
railing against, I don't know.
yeah, the discomfort is there, right? Because we have conditioned patterns.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think more and more the discomfort melts away, becomes easier to see, manage, to see for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I can say, like, I can feel in my abdomen, and it's like, oh, I know that it's okay, and
Yeah.
just continue to varying degrees, you know.
Yeah. I want to briefly share something about capitalism, the way that I've come to see it. And I've been able to see deeper layers of capitalism in my life just recently, only because I discovered my own survival panic. And I had the time and the resources and the support to go into it very deeply. And in some ways, to come out of it, having seen something and having healed in some way, deepened, softened also, and more empowered healthily. So I started to see the insanity of the way that we live today is that each one of us have to be selling something, either my time, my labor, or my skill, or my product that I create. Let's say I make necklaces at home, that, whatever it might be. I have to convince you to buy what I'm selling. And here's the bottom line. If I cannot convince you to buy, I will die. And that's where the insanity is. If I cannot sell you my product, which means I am a merchant, each one of us is a merchant, right? In the past, hundreds of years ago, there was the aristocracy and there was the working people in the fields, resources, food, and the merchants were seen as the lowlifes of the society. Merchants, money changers, they were seen as the opposite of noble. They were seen as nobodies. They were not admitted to the castle because they were seen as unnecessary and immoral people. Today, those people rule the world. The money changers, the financiers, the banks, they rule the world and their tentacles are everywhere. They have such power on us that I have to convince you to buy my product. And in this system, if I cannot convince you, the message is I'm not contributing to society. The message is maybe I'm being lazy, right? They use this to justify slavery. Oh, if they're resting, that means they're going to go to hell. Laziness is not good. Make them. This was the way that they intellectualized forced labor. They cannot be lazy because that's bad, that's immoral. Let's make them work so we are helping them go to heaven. That was one of the things I found out a few days ago. What a disgusting truth about the past of North America. Anyway, but this also means that I am worthy of living only if I can sell something. Wow. How did that all happen? How the incredible mystery of a human being, the sacredness of a human being has been brought to what? Productivity or creating something? To such a degree that I don't get to live if I cannot sell something. That to me is the definition of insanity.
Yeah. Your last comment really made me think of James Baldwin, who he only came into my consciousness recently. A Black American man, fantastic writer, and he was a prominent activist. And his question to America was, you need to find out why you needed an N in the first place. And so when you're, that is a very deep question. You know, I'm North American, my family's from Europe, and this hustle you're talking about is woven into there. Why do we need this hustle? And why are we willing to devastate other people for that hustle? And I think to, like, again, just to go back, I feel I'm a bit of a broken record. The ability to really let that land and feel and explore and then come out of that need or needs within us will then bring about the changes you're describing, because otherwise we're just going to continue.
Yeah.
Living in a system that needs us to have. I worked with someone new, and she described, you know, it seems that people have a lot of side hustles. And so how nice it would be to live in a society where we don't have to have side hustles to survive.
Exactly.
Based on that desperation.
Yeah.
But you need to explore, or we would be wise to explore the origins, the, you know, complicated origins of then that led to the system we're in. And I think also just to say, like, not to condemn the people in the past, our ancestors, for leading us into this situation, but to really be grateful and acknowledge that, like you and me, they're doing their best. They did their best, and the resiliency I have, I owe to them.
They did what they could.
Yeah.
And I think the question we can ask ourselves is individually, if we want to ask ourselves that, right? If we feel the desire for that, am I doing what I can for the world, for my own life, for the people around me that I love? Am I doing what I can today? Am I doing that? And if I'm not, why not? Because whatever we do for society in a deep way, it contributes directly to our lives. Whatever contributes directly to our lives contributes directly to society. It's connected. It's the same.
Yeah. I want to add one little caveat, because I know from when I hear you say, am I doing what I can for the world today? I've had a long history in my own life of this Protestant work ethic thing of working myself into cyclical burnouts. So just as a caveat, I'll just say, am I doing what I can out of love for the world today in a balanced way that isn't causing me harm?
Yes,
Because
for sure.
I could easily be like,
No.
running myself ragged because there's so many problems.
And that's the collective overwhelm. And we need to, we can't run on that energy.
Yeah. So I feel like I needed that caveat because I think in our society and even how we meditated was so rare that that's not helpful. And then maybe to notice guilt for not being that way or not getting enough done, and learn how to be with those things. And then that will have the effect on yourself and society, like you just said, Jake.
I think such a huge healing we can get into within ourselves, in our relationships with our community, is healing the shame, the guilt, and the fear and the traumas, so that we're no longer being motivated about anything from those places.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Right? Because those are the shackles we're carrying. Those are the shackles. That's the heaviness. And I think when that begins to dissolve, profound change we can bring into the world from a joyful place. Not because we feel we have to, but it's just like it becomes our own unique dance in the world, our own unique flavor of self-expression. It's just our big heart singing, and our song helps the world. It so happens that it helps the world, but it's not even trying to change anything at that point. It's just that you're dancing your dance because you cannot not dance it.
You remember Zuzu. I had this beautiful whippet, Zuzu, some years ago. She died. And she was just such an angel. And whippets are like sighthounds, really fast dogs, fastest land mammal by weight for those listening. And Zuzu, I would take her to a field or something, and she just had to run. That was her gift to the world. And she would just start running these huge, like, figure eights, just zigging. And it was just pure joy to watch her. And you brought me back there. And I would say she's breaking into song. And I just feel so much gratitude and some grief that she's died. And when I see my counselor, who's kind of become kind of like my village elder, if you will, she had this amazing expression for me along these lines: follow the aliveness. Which, and in part of my healing trauma, my personal as well as familial, cultural, historical, ancestral, is to get in touch with my German history, which obviously everyone knows there's a lot of problems there, a lot of trauma. So I translate into German, which I say to myself periodically, Folge die Lebendigkeit, which just simply means, follow the aliveness. So I try and do that and remember and just say to myself, Folge die Lebendigkeit.
Folge die
Lebendigkeit. Folge die Lebendigkeit.
I like that.
Follow the aliveness. And it just, even saying it, I feel the Lebendigkeit, the aliveness. Folge is follow.
Yeah.
And like, although it seems silly, like working with those strangers yesterday to take that big piece of foam, that for me, some people may shake their heads at me, and that's fine. That was aliveness, working with strangers on a task that no one had anticipated would happen when they entered Stanley Park. There was aliveness, spontaneous aliveness, and people left with the Lebendigkeit flowing through them, and I can feel that now, and it just feels so great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what, I guess maybe that's what being human is about.
Mhm.
And I feel like that every session that I do with people in
Mhm.
deep healing sessions, no matter what we're talking about, that aliveness, that I can bring my entire self to be there with them, for them, connect within me with what they're sharing. It's just such a gift,
Yeah.
not only to them, but to me.
Right.
And I love that you mentioned grief here, because what we're seeing today is the end of the capitalist utopia. In some ways, each one of us bought into the capitalist fantasy that somehow we could consume whatever we want, that somehow we could just have a job and suddenly own a house and being able to send the kids to college, have a dog, have vacation money for once a year. The capitalism utopia has failed. So we are in the rubbles of capitalism. There's so much to grieve for. There's so much to grieve for, because some of these ideals, wishes, fantasies were ours.
Mhm.
It
Of
was
course.
also my fantasy. I followed also the same rhetoric. Go to school, be a good student, get scholarships, go into the specialized workforce of the community, of the society, contribute to society, and and you you won't have to fear financially. I've done everything prescribed, everything whatsoever. I still cannot imagine being able to own a house today in Montreal, because everything's getting incredibly unaffordable.
Mhm.
I mean, there's loss there, there's grief, there's heartbreak. We each need to feel that, and hopefully with other people,
Yes.
together,
Collectively.
collectively, together. Even if the other person is a romantic partner, a group of two people, it's still a group. More, better. But at least we're not alone in our own devastation. There is a lot to be disillusioned about. Today's world is called disillusionment. That's the name of what's happening today. Disillusionment. This means a lot of repressed anger is going to come to the surface. A lot of people will realize they've been duped, they've been fucked with. They've been fooled by the agenda of the capitalists, how they mass brainwashed everybody. So a lot of anger is going to come to the surface, repressed anger. A lot of grief and heartbreak will also come. I think we need to be prepared to deal with that, starting with our own.
Can we pause again, just to maybe just have a moment to,
Yeah,
because there's a lot said to the anger, the grief
yeah, yeah.
of this
We
collective
we
dream.
we've been fooled,
Yeah.
big time.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, big topics.
Yeah.
Big topics. Yeah.
There I had, just to share with you what was happening inside of me, I had, and it surprised me, actually, I had um, a feeling of hope. I had a feeling of hope, and when I have the sensation on the top of my head and my scalp tingling pleasant, it's just it's a wonderful, like, yeah, we can do it. Hopefulness, not like naivete. And then I heard the Who, "Won't be fooled again," singing totally off melody with me. Um,
Yeah.
and just the power of being together with another and feeling
Yeah.
makes things manageable in a way.
Exactly. That's right. I think it's right there. It makes it manageable. Yeah.
If I can say, when I had a very hard year in 2019, my lovely wife sort of curated what I would watch, and she suggested I watch some Mr. Rogers. There was the feature film and the documentary. The documentary came first, and I watched some episodes, and he has this beautiful among lines, but this particular one, he says, whatever is mentionable is manageable. And so if I'm going to do like a little public service announcement now, like if you're feeling shame, anger, grief, whatever, if you have that person or yourself that you can mention it to, then it becomes manageable.
Yeah.
And
It's no
then,
longer this monster anymore.
yeah. So anything, and when I work with children and I say to them, anything can be said.
Yeah.
Anything can be said. And it's okay.
Yeah.
Because then we can manage it, and not manage it in like in a shut it down way, but to deal with it, embrace it, help it,
And
help you.
then we get to learn that our heart matters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Our heart matters. And I think the revolution we're looking for in our own lives, in the world, in our relationship, is the empowered heart. But that's twofold, right? The empowerment is one part of it. The heart is another part of it. And implicit in the heart is to get in touch with our pain.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not only the joy that lives there, the aliveness, the pain lives there too. Because the heart is tender.
Mm-hmm.
It's vulnerable. It's squishy. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It's hurtable, pain-able.
Sinead O'Connor just died, and she has this beautiful song, "Thank You," and she in the song, it's a beautiful song, "Thank you for breaking my heart. Thank you for tearing me apart," because we can't get rid of the pain of life, but we can learn how to be with it, right?
What if, just a big what if the purpose of life is to break the heart open?
Mm-hmm.
What if that's the answer to the big old question? What is the purpose of life? Maybe it's just to learn how to love from an empowered place, with our spine, with our dignity, self-worth.
Can you say that again, and then we pause again, about the meaning of life is to love, and then we
Yeah,
just pause?
maybe. I'm just saying, I'm just proposing that, right?
Yeah,
As
that's
a
definitely good.
question, each person can take that question, go with it wherever it takes them. What if the purpose of life is to have our hearts broken open to the beauty of living? And we can let that beauty inform our systems. Systems can be beautiful too. The way that we organize our societies, the systems we use, the social contracts within which we function can also be beautiful. They don't have to oppress
Yeah.
and jail and kill and send young people to their deaths by the millions. Doesn't have to be that way. What? For profit. As if we take anything with us when we die. I mean, we're here just for a few seconds, right? That's how I feel. We're just here for a few seconds, for a few minutes. Just so brief. Our lives. And so in terms of activism, I think, what am I for? Not what am I against? Not what do I hate? Which other enemy I'm going to find and point a finger? What am I for? What is my heart for? What do I want my throat to be for my words to be for my tone of voice to be for? What do I want them to be employed for? At the service of what? Is it more division in the world through hatred? Or is it for a collective kind of healing, beauty, sanity, clarity, peace? Make me an instrument of thy peace, right? St. Francis's prayer. Make me an instrument of thy peace.
It is in giving that we receive.
Yeah. Can we create a society where giving becomes the norm more and more? Today, the only norm is how much can I get?
Take.
How much can I take? And it's making us insane. It's making us completely go crazy.
I think this seems to be like a natural conclusion to our discussion. And I would just like to say a couple of things. I'd like to say thank you very much, Cenk, for this beautiful time together. And I think for me, the take home, the thing that really struck me right at the end, and I'll put it out to whoever's listening, and to myself and all the different parts of me that are co-resident with me, is that your heart matters. Your heart matters. If in doubt, you can even just say it out loud to yourself.
Yeah, how about you and I, we do this together at the same time, but
Okay.
what we say is, my heart matters.
Okay, let's do
So anyone's listening can do the same using my in their sentence for themselves. Yeah.
Okay.
My heart matters.
Heart matters.
My heart matters.
My heart matters.
And one more time. My heart matters.
My heart matters.
Thank you so much for doing this with me.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Cenk. Thank you to those at Zoom for coming up with this platform for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll see how far and wide our message might ripple.
It landed right here. That's
for me too. Thank you.
Okay.